My name is Eric Boyd, and I lead the Azure AI team at Microsoft. And it's really great to be with you all here in Las Vegas. Many people may not know I had my 15 minutes of fame in Las Vegas many years ago. I was a part of the MIT Blackjack team. They made a movie out of me and my friends and what we used to do in Las Vegas. And we counted cards and made a lot of money. And whenever I tell people that, they always say, wait, aren't you like banned from Vegas? You can't go anywhere? And well, the truth is, I'm proud to say, I've only ever been kicked out of one casino, the MGM Grand, twice. But lucky for me, the facial recognition technology that they had in the late 90s is nothing like the facial recognition technology that we have today. AI, of course, has been making such amazing strides, and this last year has been just simply amazing. I mean, just the progress that we've seen in AI and everything that's really come from it. And, there's been so much exploration in the generative AI space, and now every company is figuring out how do they get this into their products, how do they implement things. And so at Microsoft, we've really been working hard to figure out how do we give you the best tools to help you build these generative AI applications and put all of that together. And we've seen just tremendous progress. Companies from all around the world have been coming to Azure AI. We have over 53,000 customers on Azure AI. A third of those are new to Azure in the last year. So bringing a lot of people into our platform. We've got amazing breadth. Over half of the Fortune 500 companies are using Azure. And then there was a Forrester study that was done that showed that companies that are using Azure AI are getting a 150% increase in their work output. So that shows that these applications have real ROI. They're really working for people and helping them get their work done and making them more productive. And it's not just our customers that run on AI. Microsoft has bet everything on Azure AI. And so all of our copilots, all of our platforms, all of that runs on the same technology that we make available through Azure. And so everything from GitHub Copilot, which we launched almost 2 years ago now, to the Microsoft Copilot, the full breadth of everything running on the Azure AI stack. And so I want to take a minute just to walk through what is the Azure AI stack. For us, it all starts with AI Studio. That ai.azure.com is a simple place you can go and really get all of the things that you need to build these AI applications in a single place. We have the AI services, which are rich services, including things like AI Search, and of course, including the Azure OpenAI service. And then we also provide Azure Machine Learning for data scientists to build, train, deploy, and manage the full MLOps lifecycle of their models. And then there's been a ton of innovation in this space, so we have a full set of model catalogs where you can get access to the latest models, open source, the latest frontier models, all in a single place. And of course, this is all built on the Azure AI infrastructure. We really have seen where this industry is going and built massive computers. We estimated it was the 5th largest supercomputer in the world. And we make that available to our customers to help them build and train the models that they need. So I want to talk about AI in these 4 different sections here. Getting access to all of the different models, how you integrate your data, how you do this to get it into production, and then how you do it in a safe and responsible way, which is absolutely critical for people. So I'll start with the cutting-edge models. There's been a ton of innovation in this space over the last year. We sort of set the standard with the Azure OpenAI service and some of the greatest models that you can see, the frontier models really pushing the envelope. But then we've partnered with companies across the family to really bring all of these models into a single place. So whether you're generating content on your models or whether you're using images and multimodalities, whether you're taking these models and fine-tuning them specifically for your application, you can get this full set of models in the AI Studio. And so the first thing to do is to sort of look at the breadth of models. In the model catalog, you'll see models like the Azure OpenAI, the GPT-4 models, all the things you've seen from OpenAI. But we've also partnered with Mistral. We've partnered with companies like Decky.ai and brought all of their models as well together to really give our customers choice. We want to make sure that you find the model that works best for you. Many of those models we're running as models as a service. And so what that means is you don't have to mess with setting up the GPUs or a Kubernetes cluster or anything like that. You can literally just call the API endpoint the exact same way you call the Azure OpenAI service. And so Llama 2 from Meta and the Mistral family of models and others are set up to run exactly like that. And then what customers do after that is they need to experiment and really see which model is performing best for their particular application. So we give you the tools to make it really easy to benchmark them to see how each model and each setup is going to perform for your particular application. Now, I mentioned the Azure OpenAI service, and of course, this is where you can get the latest models from OpenAI, the GPT-4 Turbo, the GPT-4 Turbo for vision, the Whisper model for speech recognition, and we just added the Assistance API in preview. And so the Assistance API makes it really easy for you to build these rich assistants, pulling data together all in a single API and all packaged together. So really exciting to see all the innovation that happens there. It's easy to tell this through a customer lens as well. One of the customers we've worked with is Dentons. Dentons is the largest law firm in the world. And the thing lawyers deal a ton with is they have so many documents that they have to go through. Associates spend hours and hours on document review. And Dentons was looking for a way that they could really accelerate that, really focusing on, can we get summaries of these contracts and get the salient points really pulled out? And in building that application, they looked and found that Llama 2 worked really well for very quickly giving the scan through and getting them access to, these are the salient points that I think you need to focus on. But they also wanted to have a way where their users could chat with the model, and they used GPT-4 as the way to give them really deep insights about what's going on in this contract. And what they found is it saved a ton of work for their associates. Instead of spending 4 hours just pouring through these documents, now in 5 minutes they can very quickly get to the salient points and see what's important. And so that type of impact is just massive for them. But more than just talk about this, I'd like to invite Marco Castellania to come out and show us this model catalog and show how all of this works. Marco?
All right, thank you very much. All right, let's put this thing on the screen. As Eric mentioned, the Azure OpenAI service has been around for about a year. And a year ago, if you wanted to do something serious with AI, your choices were GPT or GPT. That was it. But today is a different time, and there are all these different models that you can use today. As Eric also mentioned, we have these partnerships, not just with OpenAI now, but with NVIDIA, with Mistral, and with Meta for Llama models, and Deci, and some models that we make ourselves. And so these are all available now in this model catalog. And in this catalog, we can see all of these different models put together. Now, if I kind of scope it down to just the Mistral model, let's see what happens if I want Mistral Large. Mistral Large is a model that's performing actually very well. Now, we should note, the OpenAI models are still on the vanguard. GPT-4 is still the best model out there by really any metric. But a lot of these models are very good at certain things, and a lot of our customers want that choice. So if I want to use Mistral Large as a service, all I have to do is open it up and press this deploy button here, and that alone gives me access to the service. That's all I have to do. I don't have to provision virtual machines. I don't have to scale things out or any of that stuff. Just like Azure OpenAI itself, I can just click this button, and I'm using Mistral Large. Now, the presence of this diversity of models raises the question, how do you choose? How do you choose which one to use now that you have all of these choices? Well, that brings us to the Benchmarks tab. So you're looking at Azure AI Studio, by the way. This is our new Azure AI interface, and in here you find the new Benchmarks tab. And I'm going to pick a few different models here. I'm going to pick GPT-4 and Llama 270B, and I'll pick one of our small models, Microsoft Phi 2. And I'll just say here that something big is coming, and it's small. These models are getting smaller and smaller, and you can get your arms around them more easily. And so let's take a look at how they compare relative to each other. So if I kind of zoom in on the screen here, what you can see is we make this graph. And in this graph, what we can, come on, there we go. So you can see Llama 2 over here, Phi 2 over here, and GPT-4 over here. And the way to look at this, and of course GPT-4 is performing the best, like I said, although Phi 2 is a contender, and it's like an order of magnitude smaller than Llama. So these small models are starting to come up. But the way to look at these benchmarks, well, it's kind of like, let's say you're shopping for a car. Here in the US, at least, when you're shopping for a car, you generally will break out the Consumer Reports magazine, and you'll look at the kind of ratings of all the different cars. But ultimately, to really understand if that car works for you, you got to test drive the cars. So later on, when Manoush comes up here, she'll show you the evaluation interface, which is how you can kind of test drive these models for your own use cases. Eric, where'd you go? Come on back. There you are.
Thanks, Marco. So the next thing I want to talk about is how you can do data integration with these different models. You know, the first question I get from every customer I talk to is, how do I get my company's data into these models? And so knowing that, we worked very hard to integrate our systems very tightly. And so, of course, Microsoft Fabric has so many great innovations, but one of the things that works the best is the one lake, single layer for all of the data. And so that's tightly integrated with Azure AI, so you can now use all of the data in one lake to power your AI models, or vice versa. You can run AI models on all of the data that you have in one lake. And one lake has so many great features as well, like the shortcut feature. So even if you have data someplace else, like Amazon S3, you can simply pull it straight through without having to do a bunch of data movement or a bunch of data preparation. Within the AI services side, we make it really easy for you to get that data into a generative AI application. We have Azure OpenAI Service on your data, and so this is where you can bring data from lots of different data sources and make it available to these applications. The typical pattern that we see is a customer will interact with a chatbot and ask it a question, and that question gets turned into a search across your data, and the right pieces of data are then fed into the Azure OpenAI model for it to then answer the question and have a really interactive experience as if the model already was trained on all of that information. And so that pattern is really powerful. We call that pattern the Retrieval Augmented Generation pattern. It's a bit wordy, a RAG pattern you'll hear as well. But what it really just means is I'm taking the data, I'm retrieving information to augment the generation that the model's going to do. But to do that effectively, this search part becomes a really important component of your application, because if you don't have a good search result, then you're not going to get the answers that you need. And so search has been, seen a ton of innovation, particularly around the space of vector search. So vector search is this idea that I can take, the incoming question and think of it as a concept, just an idea, and then I can semantically match it to other parts in my search data that are similar to that and find the most relevant bits. And so vector search is really powerful. But why would we throw away all of the things that we've done from decades of getting great at search through products like Bing and the like? And so we bring keyword search together with it. And so we call this hybrid search. And so when you do a search, you will do the vector search as well as the traditional keyword-based search. And then we have a semantic ranker layer on top of it that'll pull the best results out. And really powerful way to bring all of this together. And again, customers are doing amazing things with this. PwC is one of the largest accounting and auditing companies in the world, and they built a new auditing service to really help their employees get faster at doing these audits. And they have data from petabytes of data from thousands of customers in Microsoft Fabric. And they were able to easily pull the relevant bits into AI search and then feed that into their application. So now their employees have all of that data with an interactive bot that they can very quickly get the insights from. So really powerful to see all of that come together. So, Marco, why don't you walk us through a little bit more, exactly how that works?
All right, thank you very much. All right, let's take a look at a couple of ways that you can do retrieval augmented generation with the data that you have in Fabric and in OneLake. Now, for those of you who have been here at this conference for a while, you may have seen by now this is a joint venture between us and the Fabric team, which creates a conversational AI on your data. Now, the question that I asked here, while it seems simple, actually results in this schema in a fairly large query. So, like Julia Child, I'm going to pull that right out of the oven here. And this is what it gives me, actually. Now, the query that it made from this simple question is like a four-way join over here to answer, finally, that the most popular product category is accessories. But this is basically a conversational interface grounded on your structured data. And you can choose over here which data sets you want to use. So you may want, let's say, certain employees to be able to talk about one type of data and other types of employees to talk about another. And so you can select different sets of your schema over here to create that conversational interface. So that's one way to do it. And you often think about Fabric as a store for structured data, but it's also a store for unstructured data. So here I have my OneLake lakehouse. And in here, I have some unstructured data. I have some 10K documents, the kind of filings that different companies make when they are public on the stock market. And what I can do here, what I have done here, is I have grounded my Azure OpenAI service to my OneLake. And so my Azure OpenAI service can go search using a vector search in OneLake to answer a question like this one here. Here I ask, how many employees does Microsoft have? And in that 10K somewhere, there is indeed an answer to that question. Now, Eric talked about vector search. And vector search, when we put it that way, sounds super mathematical. But what it really is a concept search. And what that means, and the reason that we tend to use it in these kinds of retrieval augmented generation use cases, is this. Traditional search uses keywords. And so in my 10K, for example, it might say Microsoft has XYZ employees. It's using those words. So here I ask the question in a different way. I say, how many workers does Microsoft have? Now, traditional keyword search would fail here, because nowhere in these documents is it using the word workers. But a concept search, a vector search, is different. The concept of workers and employees is exactly the same. And as a result, the search engine is able to pick it up and give me the same answer. So that's really why we use vector search for these kinds of things. It's very robust in the presence of different types of words or even different languages. I could have asked this question in Spanish or French or Russian, and it still would have worked. Even though the words don't match, the concepts do. And finally, let's take a look, just a little glimpse, at what's coming next in the world of AI. Because up to this point, we've been talking about question answering for the whole of 2023. All of AI was all about answering questions, and that it can certainly do very capably. But now, we are entering the world of AI agents. So I'm going to kick this off right here. An AI agent is something that can do a complex task. And so basically, here I've given it a pretty complex task, and it is going to start noodling on that. And fortunately, it does take a few minutes, so here too, I'm going to pull that right out of the oven like I did before. And we can look at what it actually did. Now, since many of you here are data geeks, I decided to do an agent that I think many of you would relate to. This is my data analyzer agent over here. And I'm using the word agent. The OpenAI assistance, and that's what I have here, is a type of agent. There are actually a number of different agent frameworks out there, but the one that is now in preview in the Azure OpenAI service is indeed this assistance. And the task that I've given it is non-trivial. I have these ticket sales data. This is real data, although it is anonymized. These are not people's real names, but this is an actual charity event that I ran the ticketing system for years in San Francisco. And the schema on each one of these sheets is different. This one has a quantity column. This one does not, because I used a totally different ticketing system in 2018. And as a result, what it has to do is quite complex. Now, if you think about it, if I ask you this question, if I asked you, find me the top 10 buyers by quantity across all 3 years, and I gave you this spreadsheet, what would you do? Well, first you would load it up. You would look at it, you'd say, what are the sheets in there? Okay, I see 2019, 2018, 2017, and then you would dig into it. You would actually look at the schema. And as you can see here, that is what it's doing here. So it's looking at the schema of each of the sheets. And it gives me a response, and in this response, and this was what I'll call an intentional demo fail, it made a mistake. But another hallmark of agents is that they retain memory, long-term and short-term memory. So here I say back to it, I say, that doesn't look right. Did you note that 2017 has a quantity column, 2018 and 2019 don't? And it's like, sorry, let me try that again. And it goes through this again. Now, it doesn't have to start from scratch. Because it retains this short-term memory, it can go back where it left off and say, okay, I already looked at these sheets. Let me take another look at that and use that quantity column. And then it makes this kind of hypothesis here where it says, hey, it's kind of saying, well, you're right. 2017 has a quantity column. 2018, 2019 don't. Should I just assume that each row is a ticket? And I say, yes. In 2018, 2019, every row is one ticket. 2017 used a quantity column. So I'm having this conversation with it, and ultimately, it does indeed arrive at the correct result, which I independently verified over here. Well, this sheet doesn't seem to want to show itself, but in any case, this is the correct result. So these agents, they are coming. I think what you've seen here is that it's still a little bit early. I would not necessarily rely on these things for production yet. But the ability to do complex, long-running tasks that involve memory, this is going to become real very soon. And this will be 2024 in AI. Thank you. Eric, back to you.
Thank you, Marco. So Marco mentioned things that are ready for production. I think the next thing I want to talk about is how do you get these things to be production-level services. You can go and start with these solutions and build a scaffolding, a simple app really quite quickly. But then what you need to do is start iterating on it and figure out how I can really verify that this is going to work for me in production. And what happens in production is things change. And so you need to have your framework to be able to repeat the tests that you've done, the evaluations that you've done, and see as I bring new data in, as I think about moving to new models, how does this application continue to work? And so we provide tools to do that through Azure AI Studio. One of the most powerful ones we call Promp Flow. And so Prompt Flow is a tool that really helps you, build these orchestrated workflows to do everything to simulate, hey, this model is now trying a bunch of these different services, and now I can evaluate and test the results that come out on the other side and make sure that they're performing the way that I want to. And so being able to take advantage of this tool to help orchestrate things, it almost becomes like the test framework for these applications to be able to quickly verify as I'm going through the life cycle of it that it really is doing all the things that I need to. And so, Siemens is one of the largest industrial companies in the world, and so what they've done is some work really leveraging Prompt Flow on their lifecycle management. And so let me show the video of that.
At Siemens Software, we're focused on bringing together engineering, manufacturing, all the way down to the shop floor in a unified experience. Imagine you're on a factory line and you see a problem. Maybe you have gloves on, maybe you're not speaking a language that is the same as the software that has been implemented to track that factory line. The reality is problems won't be reported if it's too hard. AI allows problems to be reported in native language and automatically translated to the common language. At Siemens, we're all in on AI, and Azure AI Studio is a key tool for us.
We chose Azure AI for its comprehensive suite of tools that streamline our workflows, from prototyping to deployment and production of services. Prompt Flow's UI-first approach accelerated our adoption of advanced machine learning technologies. We have utilized Azure AI's robust infrastructure to deliver a secure and highly available Teams under Teams app. Azure AI's network isolation and SLA-backed availability were key in meeting our enterprise-grade objectives. With the Tell Me feature, we have now enabled the field engineers to be able to speak in their own language to report issues and create data items in Team Center. We believe that now the field engineers will be able to feel more included in their workplace. The managers or the engineers responsible for resolving the issue can take necessary action steps.
We're anticipating more problems reported, better problems being reported, and faster resolution times. And using Azure AI allows us to do that.
So that link brings us to the last of our four stanzas, safe and responsible AI. And so this is one of the most important areas as companies are trying to deploy AI, is making sure that it's going to work in the right way for their application. And so I mentioned earlier that the first question every company I talk to asks is, how do I get my data into these applications? The second question that every company asks is, what are you going to do with my data? And how do I know it's not going to be used in some way I'm not comfortable with? And so that's where we've had this concept for a long time that Microsoft is built on trust, and our cloud services, we really rely on the trust of our customers. We need to earn that every day. And so we do that with some of these principles. Your data is your data. What does that mean? That means we don't have any access to it at Microsoft. We can't look at it. We can't see it. It's only used for your purposes and for the things that are helping your applications. We have a lot of experience as a company dealing with enterprises' most sensitive data, their email, their documents on SharePoint, and we use those same practices across all of our Azure stack. And so some of the most stringent privacy controls and compliance all the way up to HIPAA are how we follow to make sure that we're not doing anything improperly with your data. The second point to make is that your data is not going to be used to train any large model, or to, you're not going to leak into someone else's model or help something else become better. We simply don't use the data in that way. The data never goes to OpenAI or anyone else like that. It remains purely locked up inside of your tenant. And so your data and your models really are protected every step of the way. That's something we take very seriously and want to make sure that we live up to. The last point I want to make is we've offered a customer copyright commitment to our customers. And so what this says is if you're using a generative AI application, Microsoft will indemnify you if you get sued for the content that your application creates. And so, because we know that we've got the right safeguards in place, and that's how confident that we are that we can do this in the appropriate way. So there are two sides really to trust and safety. There's the, hey, let's make sure you've got the data and we're not going to do anything inappropriate with it. And the second is, how do we make sure these applications are behaving in a safe way? And so we built the Azure Content Safety Service. And so this service is, by default, included in the Azure OpenAI calls. And it's also then available as a standalone service for integration with other open source models and things that you might want to use. And so the first phase of it is content moderation. And so content moderation is really looking at the text that is generated, the images that are incoming from your users, and really making sure they're appropriate to the right application. And this is a place where we really want to make sure our customers have controls, because there are different needs in different applications. In a gaming environment, it's totally appropriate for us to be talking about murdering the people in the next room, but less appropriate in other contexts. In a healthcare context, there's a lot of discussion about sexual things that's very normal and natural, and in an education context, completely inappropriate. And so giving you the control to figure out exactly what my application needs so I can manage my content appropriately is super important to us. The next area is protecting materials. So we want to make sure that you can detect if you're generating, say, song lyrics or copyrighted material or things like that, so that you have the control to take the actions that you need. These models are very powerful and they know the answers to a lot of things, and maybe that's not appropriate for your application, and you want to make sure you're completely preventing that. So we give you the controls to detect that. There are two new things that I want to talk about: prompt shields and groundedness detections. So prompt shields is really about making sure that the prompt that you spent so much time crafting is actually followed by the users. So when we build these models and we build these applications, you tell the model exactly how to act. You're an agent, you're going to answer these types of questions. That all goes into your prompt. But clever users have been finding ways to try and get around that and get the model to do something that you don't want it to and you don't intend for it to. And so Prompt Shield will detect that that's what users are doing, and then again give you the controls to stop that and block that, so that you can keep your model and your application really doing the things that you intended it to do, working in the ways that you had planned for it to. The last new thing is groundedness detection. So groundedness really talks to the data that you've given the model. We call that grounding the model, so that it's going to answer on the data that you've given it. And these models do have a tendency to hallucinate, to make up facts. And so the groundedness detection is looking for the data that you gave it and the output response, and making sure that the model is pulling data from the data that you gave it and giving a true response and not hallucinating. And so giving customers the ability to really detect what's going on there so that they can really control, hey, these models are going to work in the right way. We've made tremendous progress in this space of hallucination and hallucination detection. There's been a lot of work in fine-tuning the models, and you'll hear terms like RLHF and instruction fine-tuning. All of those have really helped with making these models more grounded. The number one thing that we do, though, is giving the models data in the prompt. That RAG pattern that we talked about really drops hallucination down tremendously. And so that, with groundedness detection, you can really get your models into a very great place from an application perspective. And so we worked with Shell on something like this. Shell built an internal platform they called Shell-E, which they used then to help their employees understand all of the different data that they had across Shell. Shell is a massive, multinational company, energy company, and they wanted to be able to, have their employees ask questions and about information that they had stored all over the company. And they wanted to build this on open source and other non-OpenAI models. And so they were able to use Azure Content Safety Service to directly integrate that with their application and get the benefits of it, even though it's not part of the Azure OpenAI service. And so we can bring those two things together, and it's really powerful for their applications. So I'd like to have Marnoosh come out and really walk you through exactly how some of these things work and show you the details of how everything fits together in responsible AI. Marnoosh?
Thank you very much, Eric. Hello, everyone. My name is Marnoush Sumeki, and I'm here to show you how we can put responsible AI into practice while developing our generative AI applications and copilots. Now, we know that generative AI could give rise to a variety of different content risks, and that's exactly why we have developed Azure AI Content Safety, a content moderation platform that allows you to essentially use AI to create your content and make and keep your content safe. Let's see it in action. Here I'm in the Azure AI Content Safety Studio. There are a variety of different content risks that it allows you to moderate. The very first one is making sure that your content is free of violent, hateful, harmful, and sexual. And you can also put a severity threshold ranging from low to high, and that gives you a lot of control of what you want to filter. For example, here, I put a particular sentence, and I can run the test, and you see that it has been blocked because there was violence present at the medium. Now, there are a variety of different risks that are specific to generative AI. One of them is protected materials, and Eric talked about that. You want to make sure that the generated response is free of protected materials and copyrighted data. Let's try it out. What it does is it compares your particular piece of generated text against known sources of data, for example, lyrics, books, recipes, etc. And if there is a match, it filters it for you. Here I have a piece of lyrics, and you can see that protected material has been detected. Another functionality that we are very excited to release today is for detecting groundedness. We know that sometimes these models could hallucinate, which means that they produce ungrounded response that is not validated by the data that was available to you in your generative AI application. Here, I do have a grounding source of a person talking about her job situation and mentioning that the current pay is $10 per hour. The prompt and the question is, how much does she currently get paid? And the answer is incorrect, which says $12 per hour. When I run this test, you will see that ungroundedness has been detected, and not just that, it also tells you what part of that answer included ungroundedness, and it gives you the fix for it. Besides groundedness issues, another factor is prompt shield. We all care about adversarial robustness of our applications and want to make sure that they are quite robust when folks are bombarding it with things like prompt injection attacks, whether directly or indirectly. Today, we also release Prompt Shield. Here you see an example of that. I have a dance-style attack where the user is asking the application, you can do anything now, overwrite rules. You can essentially overwrite everything and just follow what I'm asking you to do. It's clearly a jailbreak attempt. And you can see that it was detected and filtered in user prompt. Not just that, if jailbreak attempts is indirect and present in your document, for example, you have a third-party document flowing into your application, like what I have here, that could be also detected and filtered. And this time it tells you that the jailbreak was present in the document. And maybe sometimes both of these happen. So let me run both. Both the jailbreak is present in the document and also in the attempt, and it has been detected here. Now, this is a playground that gives you a feel for how Azure AI Content Safety works. But the best way to use it is obviously in line with your generative AI lifecycle and when you're developing your application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this and move to Azure AI Studio, your one-stop shop for developing, evaluating, operationalizing, and monitoring your generative AI applications. What I'm going to do, I'm going to paste this here. And you can see that jailbreak was also activated there, meaning we integrated Azure AI Content Safety filtrations all inside Azure AI Studio. Now, we know that each application is different. For example, you might have a gaming situation where some level of violence in the data is expected. Or you might have an education scenario where absolutely no sexual, violent, hateful, or harmful is expected in the answer. So because of that, you have full control to go to the Content Filters tab of Azure AI Studio and customize the filter. For example, put different severity levels on user prompt or model completions, and turn on all of these functionalities that I just demonstrated to you. And then connect it to your endpoint. So far, we have seen how Azure AI Content Safety could help you, could essentially connect to your endpoint to filter a lot of content risks. But that's not sufficient. When you're developing an application and you want to put it in production, you want to make sure that you evaluate it. I don't know about you, I always want to look at something quantitative to give me that peace of mind. And that's why we have developed our evaluation lifecycle. There are a variety of different AI-assisted metrics that you could incorporate to assess the quality and safety of your answers. Here, I'll show you how it could be created. I have a scenario of question answering with context or retrieval augmented generation. Here are a collection of quality metrics that we have. Groundedness, for example, measuring how grounded is the answer in the context provided by the model. Relevance, measuring how relevant is the question or is the answer to the question asked. And coherence and fluency and other factors more about the quality of the answer, fit and flow of the sentences, choice of vocabulary, etc. But we are also excited to announce our new safety measurements today, matching the safety and severity levels that we had in Azure AI Content Safety. So now you can choose things like self-harm, violence, hate, and sexual, and get measurement and defect rates. And next, I can just connect my endpoints that I want to use as AI judge, and upload my data. If you don't have test data, you can use our simulators to generate some data and submit this evaluation. I already have that I finished. Here you can see a sample example of the report. You see the average of these measurements and the distribution across the test data. But you can also scroll down and take a look at each input, each answer, and the context that was extracted to provide that answer, and the measurements for each line of the test set. Not just for quality metrics, but if you go to the second tab, which is risk and safety, you can also see the defect rate, which is to what extent your model has produced self-harm, violence, sexual stuff. And you can take a look at those as well and look at the justification and reasoning. Together, these functionalities helps you build a much safer application and inform your better mitigation strategies, whether it is related to meta prompt engineering or setting different settings for Azure AI Content Safety or bringing better grounding data. Now, when you evaluate, you then go ahead and put your application in production. And we have to make sure that once it is out there in production, also we take a look at these measurements and make sure that it's operating as we expected in real time. Today, we're also releasing our risk and safety monitoring, which covers monitoring of both user input and model input. With both of these, you can take a look at the number of blocked requests and block rate, and categorization of harmful content, either in your user questions or in your generations. One other thing you could do on the user input is you can take a look of the potentially abusive users and look at them through the anonymized user IDs, and then choose what policy you want to apply. So far, I showed you the Azure AI Content Safety for mitigations. I showed you how you can evaluate your generative AI application holistically. And once it's out there in production, I also showed you how you can use our risk and safety monitoring to monitor its operation in action. I hope you use this to build trust with your applications and make sure that you build applications safely with regards to your business needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Marnoosh. So this brings us back to where we started. We have the Azure AI Studio, which is the single platform, the single place to really build these rich generative AI applications. We give you access to all of the models that you may need to do them, to the tools to go and construct them, to really monitor them, to bring your data and connect your data in with it, to run them in a responsible and safe way. And so bringing all of that together in a single place is what the Azure AI Studio is all about. And we're really excited about the applications that everyone is going to go and build. We're just getting started in where generative AI is going. I mean, it's hard to believe it's only been a year since the Azure OpenAI service was launched. And the number of things that have happened in that year have just absolutely been astounding. And so I want to thank all of you for your time. I want to make sure that I call out, we have a number of other sessions later throughout the day where you can go and learn more about a number of these different areas and really see how all these things come together so that you can go and build your own applications and really transform the work your business is going to do. So I'm very excited to see how all of that happens, and thank you all for your time, and thanks very much.
Azure AI unlocks the potential of generative AI, giving you building blocks to bring intelligent apps to market quickly with pressure-tested services. Customize experiences with leading information retrieval. Build safely on one platform with the latest models. Manage the complete model lifecycle and scale AI responsibly. And tap into the most powerful supercomputer in the cloud, Azure AI, where innovators are creating the future.
All right.
Wow.
That was amazing,
Wow.
Patrick.
That
We
was
learned about AI.
amazing. Absolutely amazing.
From Azure AI
But wait,
Studio.
don't leave.
Where are you all going?
Where you
my
going?
gosh. We're not done
We're
yet.
not done yet.
But we want you to take a quick stretch, get the blood flowing.
Yeah.
And then we're going to start back up in about 10 minutes.
About 10 minutes.
All right, y'all. Don't go far.
Don't go far.
All right.
One more time.